APIs, again we have discussed what are the types of APIs we have. So I'm sure you guys have configured APIs, but if you have not, so APIs are something which requires your credentials before you can move in. Like, if you get in Google Analytics data in your inbox, you can go ahead and map it as a total connect and schedule it. But when you're doing it as an API, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and configure the APIs by means of the credentials. So what happens? You need to put in the credentials, allow it, and as an option, you can choose the website. Even in Google Analytics you need to choose the websites, or it is by default as all websites data that you can work with or pull the reports for. Segment is always optional, but you can go ahead and choose your segment in Google Analytics. Initial fetch is nothing, but from what time to what time you want to fetch the data in. So note that you can only process data for the last 90 days in your initial fetch. But definitely the last 90 days, and then, however you go forward. You can keep on adding dates and it will be fetched. As an initial fetch when you're configuring your data, it will be the last 90 days that you get your data. Extended properties, goals, data, events, data pages, etc. etc. Like if you go to Google Analytics and if you check the measurements and dimensions in there. Whatever, you can see that there's a specific format in which it is written GA and then semicolon and then pages, so you can add things like that, but in a regular Google Analytics. API. You will see that it's not a custom. It's like the measurements and dimensions are set. And that's why what they have done is they have given us a Google Analytics custom API. A custom API basically helps us to put in dimensions and measurements of our choice. Our needs and not come up with unnecessary data in my workspace or like with unnecessary data in my workspace, unnecessary dimensions or unnecessary metrics in my workspace. I don't want it, so what I do is, and also additional metrics and dimension. There are some of the measurements and dimensions which are not present in the normal API, that is, in Google Analytics. So in that case Google Analytics Custom API helps us in getting all those and retrieve them. Right, so yeah, so once we have, like configured our thing, I guess there's a data preview. Tool. I think that tells, like that is the answer to the question asked earlier. But in the new format it's been long that I've seen a data preview for an API because I configure it and go forward and put in a pivot table. So data preview is something that I've not checked for the APIs for long, but then why not check it when it is there. So yeah, so I see a data preview over here in my slide. So data preview will be there and you can check how your data is. So yeah, so that's how you configure your APIs. Okay, now comes a very important topic called data load rules. Pretty easy topic, but pretty handy, pretty useful. Data load rules is something that is that acts as a quick fix for filter between the that acts as a quick filter when we have our data and we need it to be filtered out. Okay, so what is a data load rule? Data load rules are data load rules and applying a data load rule. So data load rule is nothing, but it helps us filter our raw data before it gets uploaded to Datorama. We have talked about it, right? So if we have data from 5 or 6 agencies and we are interested in 2 agencies' data, or we have data for the entire worldwide data and we are interested in all the US and Canada, we need to filter it out as a first-hand. Can't we filter when the data is in? Definitely we can, but why do we do it at the first? Because Datorama charges us on a row-level basis and we don't want. Like you know from the initial step, it's working with data. It's the initial step whereby you go ahead and filter your data. What you don't want is unnecessarily cluttered data in your workspaces, and what you do is you go ahead and filter your data. Wherever possible from the initial inception, so that, once your data is in, that's basically the cleansed data or, it being a raw data as well, it is the accurate data that you want to work with and that you want to manipulate or that you want to harmonize or that you want to do, and not any redundant data that is going to unnecessarily make your workspace cluttered, right? So how does it work? So you see the data, you see the Excel sheet below, whereby it is said that I want only USA and Canada data to be ingested in Datorama. Correct now. Okay, now, in any other case, when you write a logical condition in a logical condition using operators, it will be country equals to USA or country equals to Canada, right? So that will be giving me, when I want data for the two countries. Are we good? Yes, okay, so country equals to US or country equals to Canada, is going to give us this thing. So how do we create a data load rule? Let's check it in Datorama. So, as I mentioned earlier as well, that whenever you want to have something like, whenever you want to create a data load rule, it has to be always created at first. So, by that logic, if we go to data load rules and now that we know that we want the data for the 2 countries of USA and Canada. What we need to do is if you do it like this, what will happen? Let me delete it. Okay, so how you do is you need to go ahead and you can create a load rule. How do you create a load rule? You go to add new. You have to give your load rule a name. There are actions called include rows, delete measurements, and fail the entire rule. So when you include rows, it tells that for this load rule we need to include these rows which match a certain condition, right? And then there are delete measurements that for this condition, delete all the measurements and keep the dimensions and then fail. The entire load is when you give a certain condition. If that is met, it will never get uploaded in data and it will fail the entire. So, for our instance, what we need to do is we need to include the rows for the dataset that we were talking about. So there will be a name. So now I want, like country as my thing, and then I go to the filters and I add a filter. I add a filter and then what happens is these things will come up, so. So likewise over here, when we have our data and our aim is to get only US and Canada data from among our, datasets. So what we will do is we have to write a condition whereby we can use operators. So once we choose, the country. So there are the fields that are there, so we have given it a name, right? DL our country. Include rows. Now, when we are writing the condition, it is, country equals to and country can be not equal. Starts with not. Starts with. Ends with not. Ends with contains, not contains, etc. etc. This is USA. Then what you need to do is you need to add a filter, because you need to. You need to have your data for country equals to Canada, right? So here is your operator of and or. Whenever there is a condition in which you need to use an and, or you can go ahead and use it so that multiple conditions are met, right?